Hey guys, thanks for coming back for another episode of 10 Minutes of Truth. If you are just joining us, you are in the last part of a 5-part series on habits that every Christian needs to develop. 5 habits that every Christian needs to develop. We've looked at the first 4 over the last 4 weeks, the habit of reading our Bible, the habit of prayer, the habit of worship, the habit of service, and now this week we are talking about the habit of fasting. Now if I can just do a quick review about fasting, we yesterday defined the primary definition of fasting, and that is the voluntary abstinence from food with a spiritual purpose in mind, a spiritual goal in mind. So that goal might be spiritual growth. That goal might be an answer to prayer. That goal might be you want someone to pray for somebody who's going through a difficult time, or maybe you're going through a difficult time. It might be to overcome some sin in your life, or maybe you just want to see God do a miracle in your life or in the life of a person that you know. So that's the primary definition of fasting. It's the abstaining from food with a spiritual goal in mind. The secondary definition of fasting is a voluntary abstinence from anything. It doesn't have to be food, but from anything that might hinder your communion with God for the purpose of prayer and communion and a specific goal in mind. So fasting is something that we do. We eliminate something out of our life that might be interfering with our communion with God for the purpose of a particular spiritual goal. So fasting is something we do before God and not others. So we don't make a spectacle of it. We don't tell other people about it. We just do this between us and God. And what it does is it enables us to focus on His heart and to focus on His Spirit. It's an intentional form of sacrifice that clears a path for us to spend more time with Him and to understand His passion, to understand His heart, to understand His kingdom desires. It's a personal, private discipline that draws us into intimacy with our Father. It's an act of sacrifice, so to speak, that moves us into the realm of faith. So that's what we talked about yesterday. And all of those episodes from all 5 habits, as well as yesterday, are all on my video page. They are in playlists for you so that you can just click the playlist and go through all 4 or 5 of those lessons. But today, what I want to do is just give you 2 fast principles. But before I do, if you enjoy the content that you're receiving through this page, I want to encourage you to subscribe to this page. Click the notification bell so that you know when all of the videos are being uploaded. And then I want you to share this page with others, to share these messages with others, because I believe that God has a great word for us and that we need to work together to spread this word to as many people as far as possible, as fast as possible. So subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this with others. Now, your 2 fast principles. Since most of us will consider fasting, at least from something, whether it be food or something else, let me share just a few principles and purposes. Principle number 1 is that fasting is expected from every one of us. Every one of us are expected to fast. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 16 through 18, Jesus says, when you fast, not if you fast or should you fast, but when you fast, don't be like the hypocrites with a sad countenance. They disfigure their faces that they may appear to men to be fasting. Assuredly, I say to you, they have the reward. But you, when you fast. Now, Jesus comes to us, to the individual, not to the group, but to the individual. And He says that when you fast, anoint your head, wash your face, so that you don't appear to be fasting. Remember, that's just between you and God. And He says that the Father who sees in the secret place will reward you openly. Now, I say that fasting is expected from every believer. Let me tell you why I say that. Because when we look at the context of the passage, and we always need to remember context. Context is key. The context of the passage in which Jesus talks about fasting is, at the beginning of the chapter, He talks about giving and not letting our left hand know what our right hand is doing. And then He talks about prayer and going into the secret place. And then He teaches us the Lord's Prayer. And then the third thing He does in this passage is that He talks to us about fasting. So none of us would argue Actually, all of us would completely accept the fact that Christians are supposed to give and that Christians are supposed to pray. But then we have a tendency to just skip over the fact that fasting is in the same context that these two habits were spoken of. And we tend to think that this is not expected of me, but it is. Jesus talks about praying, Jesus talks about giving, and then Jesus talks about fasting. All of these are to be done regularly, they're to be done privately, and they're to be done with the right motives. Notice in all of these it says we have the expectation that when you pray, when you give, and when you fast. That's the expectation. The instruction is to keep it personal. And the blessing is that God will bless us. So that's principle number one. It's expected of all of us. Number two, it's important that you check your heart before you fast. Proverbs 28 and verse 13 says that he who covers his sin will not prosper. Now, fasting doesn't impress God. Fasting doesn't impress God with our spirituality to the point that he ignores our sin, which means that God is not going to bless us when there is known sin in our life. The writer of Proverbs says that he will not prosper. In the Hebrew, literally, that means to move forward. He who covers a sin will not move forward. We cannot fast with the expectation of receiving God's blessing or God's answer when we know that there is sin in our lives. Fasting may be used by God to expose sin, but we cannot use fasting to cover up sin. And so let me remind you of the two things that we talked about today. Number one, fasting is between you and God, and fasting is expected. So I want to challenge you to begin praying today about a time when you will fast and about what you will fast from. You might be fasting from the internet. You might fast from YouTube. You might fast from the TV. You might fast from food. But I also want you to fast for a reason. Why are you eliminating these things out of your life for a period of time? Is it so that you can commune with God? Is it for an answer to prayer? Is it something that you're seeking? Whatever it is, I want to challenge you to ask God and to pray about a time to fast and to fast from something. And number two, be sure to check your heart before you do. Make sure that you have confessed sin, make sure that you're not holding anything back, and make sure that your heart is in the right place before you begin. This has been 10 Minutes of Truth with Pastor Jeremy Skinner. Do me a favor, drop me a comment and tell me about your experience with fasting. Don't forget to subscribe, to like, and to share this with others. And together, we can reach the world for Christ. Amen. And God bless you, brothers.